No one person has generated as much hate, as much publicity, and as much of a stan or fandom as Amanda Knox. The saga, which began for her in the early 2000s and only ended a couple of years ago with the second appeal in one of the highest courts in Italy, has finally ended the saga. And even today, people still question whether or not the case was handled correctly and if the real truth ever came out. In 2020, my friend Michelle Muldoon and I decided to dive headlong into the murder of Meredith Kercher and to see what we could see. This became one of the videos where I received the most hate because of my opinion and standing by the decisions of the courts and saying that she was not guilty. That does not mean that I don't think she didn't make some mistakes and probably contributed perhaps to the behaviors and the element and the aura around the death of her roommate. I think there was a lot of carelessness on behalf of a lot of parties that led to Meredith's death. Do I think she actually did it? No. I'll state that up front. But that does not mean that she's 100% innocent, quote unquote. Well, with that being said, I'm going to share with you now the complete extended version of that investigation that Michelle and I did. The two-parter that we did way back in 2020 will still be on the channel as part of my Amanda Knox, Meredith Kercher playlist if you'd like, but this again is aimed toward those that like a longer video. So, with that being said, let's dive in.
Keto and crime, keto and crime. We uncover the grime on keto and crime. Keto and crime, keto and crime. Now is the time for keto and crime.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Thought Crime and Keto and Crime. Today I thought we'd take it a little bit casual. I'm outside on my porch. It's kind of a partially cloudy day here in Tennessee, so it's nice and cool out here, about 67 degrees. Had some rain last night, so everything's nice and open. So please excuse any background noise. Got a hound dog barking over in the distance. I live in a very country area, so I have some hound dogs over in the distance doing their business. But I thought we'd just sit together, have a nice long chat about the murder of Meredith Kercher. That's right, the Amanda Knox case. And the reason I say the murder of Meredith Kercher is so often she's forgotten. It's all about Amanda Knox. Now, nothing against Amanda Knox. I do think she was wrongfully convicted. And of course her story should be told, but I think Meredith's story is not always told. So I'm going to try to tell as much of her story along with Amanda's story as I can. So, let's relax, grab a cup of coffee, and join me for what may be a three-parter. I've already filmed a conversation with my good friend Michelle Muldoon, which will go up as the final part of this, so let's get into it. Murder of Meredith Kercher. Okay, let's start with Amanda, because she's the one we know the best, and then as we move further in her story, we'll get into the other players in this. Amanda was born July 9th, 1987, in Seattle, Washington. She was the daughter of a teacher and an accountant for the local Macy's store. She grew up in traditional middle class upbringing, and then her parents divorced. But her parents had a very civil divorce and lived within walking distance of each other so that the children could see both their parents, even though her mother did remarry, but her and her stepfather were pretty close. Amanda was known as a very bright child, did very well in school, so no problems there. She fell in love with the art of Italy, often dreamed of going there. She studied the classics. She had a great passion for the works of Michelangelo, Raphael, all the masters, and really talked about her love of anything classical. And that includes, excuse me, I just snorted. And that includes languages, and she was very interested in foreign languages. So she decided she was going to go to the University of Washington and study linguistics, which is the study of foreign languages. And she became fluent in French and German and wanted to study Italy in an emulsive environment. So what's the best way of doing that? Moving to an Italian-speaking country and immersing yourself into it. So that's what she decided to do her senior year in 2007, is to move to Italy as an exchange student and study as an exchange student there. And that's what she did. She worked 3 jobs to save her money. She was not a trust fund baby, was not, you know, some princess that got everything handed to her. No, she had to work. She came from a very traditional middle-class family. So she worked really hard. One thing also that she was very athletic. She loved soccer. She was one of the more aggressive soccer players on her high school and college intramural team. And as a result, she earned the nickname 𝐋𝐞𝐭'𝐬 because of her aggressiveness in play of soccer. This nickname would come back to haunt her later during the trial, but remember, it was given to her because of her aggressiveness in playing soccer, not because of her sexuality or anything like that, which is what it got turned into. So she moves to the Italian city of Perugia. Perugia is the Italian version of a college town, centered right in the middle of the country. If you look at the country of Italy, the boot shape, it's right in the middle of the boot. And it's a very old city, going all the way back to Etruscan times, where it was a fortress to protect Rome from invading tribes like Hannibal and Carthage and things like that. So it's a very ancient city, and it has become a university center where a lot of universities have exchange programs with the university there, and so you have a lot of different nationalities moving in there. So it's kind of like, it's hard to find a native Perugian there. It's mostly transplants. So that's the kind of city that she moved to, which was not unusual at all. When she traveled to Perugia to study at the University of Perugia, she settled in a flat, a 4-student, well, actually an 8-student flat. She had the top part. There were more apartments below, but she shared the top part of this flat that would become very important at Via della Perugula 7. That was her address in Perugia. She actually shared with 3 other girls. 2 Italian women that were studying law, Filomeno Romanelli and Laura Mazzetti. They were both in their late 20s, so 26, 27, and 22-year-old Meredith Kercher, who was an exchange student from the University of Leeds in Great Britain. Meredith Kercher was born December 28, 1985, in Southwark section of South London. She was known as Mez to most of her friends, had a great love of music and especially politics. She traveled a lot, fell in love with Italy because of a summer trip she took with her family there at 15, and wanted to get into the folds of politics within the European Union. So it was a very exciting time. The European Union was still fairly new. So she wanted to get into that scene, and to do that she had to study politics and had to be multilingual. So she decided in her senior year that she would journey to the University of Perugia and study politics there and become fully immersed in Italian culture. And she did, and she ended up rooming with Amanda and the two Italian law students. Now, Mez was also very interested in music. She was even in a couple of music videos filmed in her hometown of London. I'll insert a few clips here.
A life filled with possibilities. This is her acting in a music video back home in England.
So she was known as a very quiet, reserved girl, a very dedicated student, which is what many people say led to some conflict, supposed conflict, between her and Amanda Knox. The other two roommates, Filomeno and Laura, were also pretty astute students, and according to everyone in the house, Amanda was more of the party girl, liked to go out, liked to see the sights, but they were older, as was Mez. She was a couple of years older. Amanda was 20. She zoomed through college because she had a very high IQ, did very, very well, and yeah, went out. I can't say that I wouldn't do the same, and I was pretty much a homebody in college too. So anyway, so these were the four occupants of that top part of the house. The lower part of the house was occupied by four young Italian men, which Kercher and Knox both hung around with on a daily. These four boys also had another friend that hung around, kind of couch surfed in the area, and also played basketball with them, by the name of Rudy Guede, who was a young transplant from the Ivory Coast of Africa. He was known to have a record for drugs, petty theft, and assault. Now, I don't understand how someone like that even got into the country, but that's what we were dealing with. And he was a friend of the four young Italian men that lived below the Guedes, and he would often hang out playing basketball, hanging out with them, and he also knew the ladies as a result of hanging out there. By all accounts, the young ladies got along just fine. They hung out together. One night, just a couple of weeks after joining, of coming to Perugia and learning to get to know each other, they decided to go out to a night of classical music. And it was there that Amanda, who was forever obsessed with Harry Potter, she had just read the first Harry Potter book in German and was trying to read the second in Italian, looked across the music hall and saw a young man that reminded her of an Italian Harry Potter.
He wanted me.
His name, Raffaele Sollecito, who was a young 23-year-old graduate software engineer student, also at the University of Perugia, whose father was a very well-known urologist in Italy, and as a result, he did not have to have roommates. He had his own flat that his father paid for that had some plumbing problems that will become important later. Also along this time, it was noted that Kercher spent a lot of time with Knox, and Kercher had even started dating a young Italian with the last name Sollecito. We don't know a lot about him, but she had become romantically involved with him. And she also hung out quite a bit at the bar where Amanda worked as a barmaid. Now, it was owned by a young Congolese man by the name of Patrick Lumumba. And he was very friendly with all the college students that came around there, also very friendly with his employees, was known to hang out with them, smoke a little weed. Now listen, weed was legal in Italy at that time, so smoking around, especially in a college town, is not as unusual as it may seem. Certainly not, even in the United States, in a college town, you're going to have a lot of marijuana use. The same was here, and they just spoke it a little more openly. Because when I say illegal, maybe I should have said it was still more decriminalized. It was kind of more accepted than it was in the United States, so it was not unusual for people just to smoke it in public, which Patrick would hang out with his employees, smoke, became very, very close with them. So it was not unusual for Patrick to text his employees and them to text him back and to otherwise have a very friendly relationship with him. I've had jobs like that. They turn out to be pretty cool. All right. So let's fast forward to one tragic day in the fall of 2007. November 1st, 2007, it was a public holiday. A lot of Italians were away. They had gone out. Amanda was spending, because she had only met Raffaele about a week before this, but they had instantly become attracted and had started what I call a 20-year-old romance, sleeping together, smoking weed, hanging out, spending every minute of the day together. She was actually staying over at his house that night. About 5 p.m., there was actually a movie rented on Raffaele's computer. They said they smoked weed, they had sex, they were just hanging out, and Amanda was supposed to go to work about 9 p.m. that night, but she got a text from Patrick saying because of the holiday, weren't a lot of people expected in the bar, she should just take the night off. So she actually texted him back, okay, and in Italian said, I will see you later. All right, so Amanda spent the night with Raffaele. They woke up early the next day. She was going to take a shower, but couldn't because of the very bad plumbing in Raffaele's flat. And he said, okay, you go home, which they were within walking distance. You go home, get a shower, come back. I'm going to call my father and get this plumbing worked out once and for all. So she leaves, goes back to her flat. She finds the door of the flat unlocked, which was very unusual. She walks in, notices really nothing going on in the front room until she walks into the bathroom and notices blood on the sink, blood on the floor, and then just happens to walk over to 𝐻𝐞𝐿's door, attempts to open it, and it's locked. So she picks up her phone and attempts to call 𝐻𝐿's phone. There was no answer, so she begins to get scared. She walks outside, calls Raffaele, who comes over. He too, of course, notices that the blood in the bathroom, the door is locked, so he does what he thinks is best, and he calls the police. By this time, her other 2 roommates have come out. They are all having the same kind of fears as they tried to get in contact with Meredith. No answer. And they wait for the police. The police arrive, but they send 2 postal inspectors or 2 postal policemen instead. Them seeing the blood, realizing this could be more than just a missing person or somebody having an illness or something like that, they decide that it's a little too much for them, so they call the military police and regular police and decide to wait. However, the police did not arrive until a little after 1 that day, and as a result, the postal police, not knowing quite how to handle a crime scene, allowed all the roommates and Raffaele to mill about the apartment, touch things, and so you had a very disturbed crime scene. When the regular police arrived, there had been a lot of disturbance. They immediately asked the roommates to call her phone one last time. They did. They did hear it ringing in the house, so they knew something was aghast, and they decided to break in the door. At this time, Meredith was found in her room, throat slit, towel across her face, and obviously deceased and had been for some time. The level of the body was, rigor mortis was starting to kick in, so it was obvious she'd been dead for quite a while. There was a kitchen knife found in the room. There was also blood all over the place. There was a bloody footprint that obviously was from a Nike shoe. There was a bloody thumbprint under the pillow on Meredith's head. There was a bloody handprint on the wall. There was blood tracked from Meredith's room into the bathroom. Now,
there are 47 cuts and bruises on her neck, legs, face, inside her mouth. Her clothes ripped off, and around her body, etched in blood, a shoe print, a handprint on the wall, a footprint on the bath mat in the bathroom, drops of blood on the faucet. Meredith Kercher had studied karate. It's clear she fought hard.
This time, Amanda was outside making a phone call to her mother and said that she heard the door crack open, and then she heard what she thought to be people speaking Italian very quickly and in a very distressed manner. So at that time, she hung up and she went in and only to discover her roommate had. The first two detectives on the scene were Monica Napoleoni and Marco Cicciarella. Now, Napoleoni was the one that did all the initial interviews of Amanda and Raffaele and the other people that lived in the house. She was very hostile toward Amanda from the beginning. In fact, honed in on why the police weren't called as soon as she arrived there after, 9:30 in the morning. Why didn't she call immediately? Knox simply informed her she didn't immediately think anything was wrong. It was only after she got into the bathroom that she saw the blood and then realized Meredith's door was locked and she couldn't get her on the phone, that she became distressed. She did then call her boyfriend because she said she wasn't sure of what to do. He came over, he called the police, and then they sent their own type of police investigators. But Napoleoni seemed to take that as more Amanda complaining and blaming the police, I think, for the lack of response. So, yeah. Wasn't a very pleasant relationship between Napoleoni and Knox. They actually began to ask all of the members of the household to come to the police station for an interrogation as they did their dusting of the crime scene. And it was noted that Rudy Guede, who would become quite an intricate player, had already left town by this time. He was staying, as I said, down below with the other young men that lived below, and they were noted as telling Napoleoni he had left suddenly. This was noted. All right, so over the next few days, from November 2nd through about November 4th, all of the roommates were interrogated at the local police precinct. All of them were interrogated fairly quickly, except for Raffaele and Amanda, who were interrogated a total of 56 hours over those 4 days. It was noted that during the interrogation, Napoleoni, after questioning the other 2 female roommates, were told that perhaps there was a beef between Kercher and Amanda Knox, because Amanda was a partier, Meredith wasn't, so there seemed to be, maybe there was issues there. That they commented that Amanda, after the police had left on the first night and they were discussing it, one of them had said, "I hope Meredith didn't suffer too much," and they quoted Amanda as saying, "Of course she suffered, her effing throat was slit." So, yeah, that was at best tacky, I think. But I can also understand how I was at 20 and how I might have been equally sarcastic, like, duh, of course she suffered. What are you even talking about? I think that's how she meant it and how later on she said she meant it, even though she said she regretted ever saying it. So her and Raffaele were interrogated. It was also noted during the interrogation that the other people waiting in the waiting room said that she was turning cartwheels and she was doing yoga stretches and she was being very romantic with Raffaele. And later on, Amanda said that, yes, she was doing some stretches. She did the splits. She does not recall doing a cartwheel. But she said she was just relieving stress because she had been held there at the police precinct over the last few days. So I can only imagine how stressful that was. By November 4th, Napoleoni and Cicciarella had told the public that it was someone known to Meredith that probably killed her. And it was that same day that the interrogations of Raffaele and Amanda Knox turned up. Raffaele has later said that he was interrogated, yelled at, screamed at, basically honing in on the fact that he was saying that Amanda was there at his apartment all night and there was no way she could have left to do this crime. And he was supposedly led into thinking that maybe she could have. He said that the police officer said, "Well, don't you think she could have slipped out in the middle of the night? It's only a few minutes walk. It's very possible she could have left and you not know it." And he said, At that point, he became scared, and he actually said, well, maybe she did leave. On the other side of the precinct, they were also interrogating Amanda. Amanda said she was even slapped. She was hit in the back of the head. She was yelled at. She was only allowed an interpreter after a lot of pleading. She was basically led into admitting that someone that she knew who killed Meredith. And she said they kept honing in on her boss, Patrick, by saying that because she told Patrick via phone that she was going to see him later, that meant she was going to see him later that night, was that back at the house when they sexually assaulted and murdered Meredith. She tried to explain to them that in the English, it simply means see you later, means I'll see you soon, whenever I see you again. However, in Italian, it means that I will indeed see you later that same day. So that's what they were honing in on. And she said after being pretty much delirious, no food, no water, very few bathroom breaks, she was in a daze. And she did finally say, well, Patrick was there that night and he might have killed Meredith. Now, I think of everything that Amanda did, that was the worst. I don't understand the delirium she was under, so I can't speak to that sort of stress, but I could see maybe implicating myself more than another person under duress. But then again, they had led Raffaele to implicate Amanda too. It seemed they were all honing in on Amanda. And also during that time, they had dug up the fact that she smoked weed, had been sexually loose, that is, she had a lot of premarital sex, but Raffaele was also doing the same thing. And it seemed that the story put forth by the investigators was one of a witch from America, drug and sex induced, possibly in a satanic cult of some sort, had led their poor Italian boy astray and had killed Meredith. But nevertheless, Amanda, in a stupor, did implicate Patrick. Patrick was arrested. He said from that time on that Amanda ruined his business, his life, and everything. He was completely exonerated later on when it was proven he was not there. He had plenty of people that had seen him working in the bar that night that said he was at work until well after midnight. So, and even his roommate said he came home. So he was cut loose, but he said it was enough to ruin his life. And I can completely concur to that. Amanda has come forward many times since she regret what happened, but she truly felt she was led into it. In fact, she was forced, she said, under duress to sign a confession written in Italian, which she could barely understand, and was not allowed a lawyer or anything. So I think there was a huge abuse of power at the Perugia Police Department. Enter lead investigator and later on lead prosecutor Giuliano Magini. He was actually known in Italy as a specialist in cult killings and other things of that nature. He actually put forth the argument. He was the one that put forth the idea that Amanda was evidently involved with the Freemasons or some other secret organization and was involved in satanic practices and had led Raffaele astray and therefore done the murder of Meredith in a satanic or ritualistic way. And it was shortly after his appointment that Marco Cicciarelli actually removed himself from the investigation, leaving Giuliano Magini and Napoleoni in charge. In fact, Cicciarelli has been quoted as saying he thought a lot of the arrests were mistakes and never should have been done. But it seemed that the narrative they were going for in those early days was that Raffaele, Amanda, and Patrick had killed Meredith in some Masonic, satanic ritual killing. However, because a lot of the DNA evidence at the site was disturbed, it was not the best handled. But what it did reveal is some things that totally countered the earlier findings that said that the bloody Nike footprint on the bedroom and the bathroom were actually Raffaele's. DNA was taken from everyone that lived in the house. And it was discovered that all of the blood, most of the blood in the bathroom and the bedroom was Meredith's, because she had bled out a lot. Some of Amanda's blood was also found in the bathroom, but she went on to explain that's because she lived there. She had cut herself cooking. She had had a menstrual period while living there, so it was not unusual that her blood could have been in the sink or on the toilet and any number of places. She could have had infected gums at some point and brushed her teeth, and her blood would have been in the sink. What I'm saying is her DNA was supposed to be there. They had said earlier that the bloody 𝐾𝐞𝐭'𝐬 footprint found in the bedroom belonged without a doubt to Raffaele, but it was later discovered that he did not have a pair of shoes that matched that pattern. But who did? Rudy Guede. It was found that those were his shoes, his fingerprints and handprints, which were on file because he was already an arrested criminal for burglary and drugs and other things, that the bloody handprint was perfectly his handprint. The bloody thumbprint underneath Meredith's pillow was also perfectly his thumbprint, and that those were his shoes in the bathroom. So he was arrested along with Amanda and Raffaele. A few days later, he had fled to Germany and was arrested in Germany, extradited back to Italy, and was interrogated. And he at first said that he had gone home. He had been hanging out with Meredith. They had gone upstairs to have sex. They had done the deed. He got up. He went into the bathroom. He then heard a scuffle in the bedroom, went back in. He saw a tall man over Meredith. He had evidently cut Meredith's throat. She was bleeding. He fought with the man. The man left. He tried to staunch the flow of blood from Meredith's throat with the towel that was found over her head, but he could not save her because he was already a convicted criminal. He was afraid to call the police, so he simply fled. That was the story. He never once implicated Amanda until several hours later. Again, interrogation, the same interrogation methods I'm sure they used on Amanda and Raffaele. He later said, yes, Amanda was there and she watched. He was tried separately in 2008 and was sentenced to 16 years for the murder of Meredith Kercher. Now, Raffaele and Amanda were kept in custody until their trials began. At the trial, again, McGeaney brought out that he thought it was a satanic ritualistic killing. He brought out that he thought it was an orgy gone wrong. Lots and lots of things. The police department did testify that they gave Amanda access to food and water and bathroom breaks during their interrogation. However, they did not film them, so we have no way of proving it. Simply Amanda's word against their word, and then Raffaele's word against their word. However, they were found guilty and sentenced to 26 years for Amanda, 25 years for Raffaele, and were placed in prison near Perugia, Italy. Amanda's parents had pretty much mortgaged and taken out loans of everything that they had to come to Italy. They never left Italy. They stayed there. They went to see their daughter whenever they could get into the prison to see her.
They were always there. They were there 100% of the time.
Did you think what it was costing them spiritually, actually?
I felt incredibly guilty for what they were having to sacrifice for me. And there was a certain point in my thinking in prison that if it didn't work out and I never was free again, I was trying to figure out how I could ask them to move on with their life without me.
While there, she started what would become her book, Waiting to be Heard. She had luckily an American roommate. She said they sang the Star Spangled Banner every morning. They talked about their lives back home. She said those things kept her sane. Even though she did say she had some bouts with suicidal thoughts, and later on confessed that she was sexually abused and sexually harassed by not only guards, but other prisoners there as well. So it was not a great place to be for Amanda. Her and Raffaele were in jail almost 4 years, over 1,400 nights is how she claimed it, before their Italian defense teams actually got the appeal up to the appellate court, who then overturned it and said they were to be freed immediately because of the way the investigation was handled, the interrogation was handled, and more importantly, the way that the DNA was messed with and could no longer be used. Pretty much the prosecution's case was all circumstantial. It was based on the imagination of McGeaney, who saw some kind of cult figure. It was never based on scientific evidence. The only fingerprints that were found in Meredith's bedroom, besides Meredith's, was Rudy's. The only DNA of Meredith's that was found were in places she should have been because she lived there. They even brought out that her DNA was found on the kitchen knife. Well, she said she used that kitchen knife to cook. They even said that they found a very small amount of Raffaele's DNA on Meredith's bra clasp. But that bra clasp had been found the day of the murder, but it was never seen again until several days later when it was found in another area of the house, evidently being kicked across the house. And it could have picked up Raffaele's DNA from that because he was dating Amanda. He was in the house. So Raffaele was sent home. Amanda flew back to Seattle, Washington immediately and tried to take up her life again. However, in 2013, the prosecutors decided to retry the case. Now, Italian justice system is not like the American justice system. She could never be retried here for the same thing because of double jeopardy laws. That does not apply in Italy. They can restart a trial, introduce new evidence in Italy, so double jeopardy does not apply. And she refused to go back to Italy. I don't blame her. And so she hired Italian lawyers to handle her defense. And because of the knife DNA that it was found, her DNA on the handle, Meredith's on the blade. I mean, it was the murder weapon. We've established that. She was found, her and Raffaele were found guilty and sentenced to 28 years for Amanda, 26 for Raffaele. She refused to return to Italy. Even now President Donald Trump weighed in and said he thought she was innocent and this was a miscarriage of justice, and he would look very disfavorably if the American government did extradite her. So
for the past few years, you mentioned to me that you spoke with her father this afternoon. What did he say?
Well, he couldn't have been happier. It's about time that this happened. I mean, it's ridiculous. She was never guilty. All the evidence proved that. If you look at this prosecutor, he has his own issues. He's got a terrible reputation and a terrible past. And he had just a thing. It was just, he had this thing about her somehow, and probably has it about other people too. So it was time, and hopefully she's now going to recapture her life and do a good job in doing it, and maybe, frankly, become a big star, and somehow she can get some dividends out of this nightmare for her.
American government had a pretty hard decision to make. She was not required to return to Italy until an appeal had been heard. So if that appeal was heard and they upheld that decision, then the United States would have to make the decision. The Obama administration at the time would have to make the decision whether or not to extradite her. And a lot of celebrities and high-level politicians weighed in and said they thought she was innocent. And for some reason, the Italian justice system there were messing with her because she was a sexually active American girl. A lot of slut-shaming going on here. Finally, 2015, the nightmare ends. The Supreme Court of Italy ruled that there was not enough solid evidence to convict either of them. Well, they did say they had enough evidence to convict Raffaele. I don't get that, but they weren't going to. I don't know if they were just trying to save face, but okay. But they literally said there was not enough evidence, solid evidence, to convict Amanda, so they overturned both guilties, and they also exonerated her of these crimes. She could never be tried again because the Supreme Court did exonerate her. Since then, Amanda has dedicated her life to advocacy for people falsely accused in foreign countries. She has returned to Italy a couple of times to help other people falsely accused. She has become a producer of her own documentary. Her book, Waiting to be Heard, has done very, very well. She recently got married. Was a little bit of a scandal there, trying to raise money for a wedding. We won't get into that. Michelle and I will talk about that in the second part. Also, Raffaele is back home in his hometown in Italy. He started a computer consultancy, which did really, really well, but then has recently became a true crime commentator on an Italian true crime television show. So both of them doing real well. Yes, they're making money off of this crime. I'm always torn on that, but you have to realize that they have been proven innocent. They can no longer be held up as guilty. I believe the guilty person, Rudy Guede, is in prison. He's still in prison serving that sentence. 16 years was not enough for what he did to Meredith. I at first believed that they had consensual sex and that he killed her. They got into a fight and he killed her. I really believe he forced himself on her after reading more on it, because his DNA was found all over the place, including in Meredith. So I really believe he tried to forcibly rape her. She fought back. She was a black belt in karate. I believe she fought back, and he killed her. Now, that's what I believe. So my opinions on this case have changed as more and more evidence comes in. So that's kind of where I stand. To the 𝐾𝐞𝐿 family, I can't imagine the pain they've gone through. I hope that they can rest in the laurel that the guilty party is in prison, and I hope he never gets out. I hope somebody does to him what he did to her within the Italian prison system. I really do. You know, you can call me evil or whatever. I hope that happens. But anyway, that's kind of where we are with this case. I hope you enjoyed it. It was a long one. Got part 2 coming out later this weekend. Thank you so much for watching. If you want to support the channel, links are below. Let me know your opinion on this case. Leave that down below as well. Give me a like. Give me a share. Thanks a lot, guys. And until next time, 𝐲𝐞𝐿 out. So here we are. Welcome back to Keto and Crime and Thought Crime. Today, part 2 or 3. I'm not sure how long my actual summary of the episode of this is going to be, whether it's going to be 1 part or 2. But welcome to either part 2 or part 3 of the Amanda Knox case with my good buddy Michelle here.
It's fucking crazy. I just right here at the top, I would just like to start out by acknowledging that there's a lot of moving parts here.
Yes. This is one of the most intricate, deep, big cases I think I've ever encountered, with a lot going on. It spans over 7 or 8 years, and in a way it's still going on. So it's weird, even though the justice part of it has been settled. The Italian Supreme Court has finally ruled on it.
Mm-hmm.
But so we don't think there's ever going to be another prosecution of Amanda or Raffaele, but you know, the mystery around it still goes on. And I think the worst part of it is that there's a dead girl. There's a dead woman, Meredith Kercher, who no one really knows who killed her.
Right.
And her family is just kind of left. I mean, there is the one gentleman that was actually sentenced to 16 years.
He's still in jail, right? Rudy, what's his name?
Yeah, Rudy. He's still in jail, but was given 16 years for a murder.
You know, that's that kind of stuff is pretty common in European justice systems, where the focus is more on rehabilitation. And even life sentences in a lot of places. I'm not sure specifically about Italy, but I've heard for sure that life sentences in quote unquote life sentences in various other countries are like 25 years or something.
Yeah.
It's just
not a true life sentence, even
right.
even the 2 sentences that were given to Amanda and Raffaele were 28 and 25 years, respectively.
Right.
So they weren't life sentences in the term that they would be given actual
Right.
natural life in the USA.
Well, yeah, in the way that, and I don't know how I feel about that, one way or another. And that's not really what we're here to discuss.
No.
Anyway.
Oh, I agree. There are some criminals that need to be locked up for the rest of their natural born lives because they're a danger to society.
And there, on the flip side of that, there are also some criminals that we here in the United States want to keep locked up for a long ass time, even though they don't necessarily.
Yeah, some that
I don't
are
think deserve
actually
that.
rehabilitatable, capable of being rehabilitated.
Or like nonviolent crimes in general.
Like, okay, I'm going to throw a name out here, Charles Manson. We should never have wasted the amount of taxpayer dollars on his butt that we did and kept him alive. They should have went ahead and gassed him. He was a danger to others. He still controlled people on the outside. That was proven. He was a nut job. He was a racist. He was a misogynist. He was dangerous.
It's my understanding that it costs more money to have somebody on the. I don't know. All right.
Well, we could get into the politics.
Already out of hand.
Yeah, we could get into the politics of what it costs to feed and clothe and take care of a prisoner versus, how much it costs to actually off them.
Yeah, sure.
And that depends, electric chair. Most states now use lethal injection, which I think is more humane, and I'm glad. But the cost of those drugs and who administers we just need to have a separate political discussion about that. So.
See, this is what I'm saying about this case, is we're 3 minutes in.
And we're fighting.
Already it's off the rails.
Yeah.
And not even about specifically any of this. So I did, in my attempt to research this, come across some message boards where people are just like, well, I guess some people are just always going to believe that she's innocent.
Yeah, but
the
reason she was found, given a reprieve from all this, is because of the shoddy amount of evidence that actually pointed to her. There was a reason, I'm probably never going to be able to go to that part of Italy after I say this, but the Italian police in that area,
Perugia.
Shitty. Yeah, they handled this pretty shitty.
Well, the wrong kind of police came to the
postal
inspectors. All right.
Let's start from the beginning.
Let's start at the beginning.
Okay, Amanda Knox was born in 1987 in Seattle, or suburb of Seattle. Her mom was a teacher. Her dad worked in the finance department for Macy's.
Yes.
They eventually divorced. She remarried. She still lived in a pretty upper middle class type of environment with her and her siblings. But from what we understand, pretty down to earth young lady. She worked hard. She decided to major in linguistics. She always had a love for Europe, So
she has a real Reese Witherspoon in Election vibe about her.
Yeah, she does. She does. Yeah, I mean, just very into art, very appreciative of art. Several video clips I've seen of her extolling the attributes of the statue of David. That's I believe who was that? Is it Raphael?
That was Michelangelo, I think.
Michelangelo's David. Sorry. But extolling how beautiful that form was and how she wanted to go back and see all those great works of art. So she had lofty dreams. Yeah.
Oh, she loves the David. No kidding.
Well, she loves the D. But in any case, D is in David. Get your mind out of it.
No, I followed.
But she actually legitimately wanted to go back, so she went to the University of Washington, majored in linguistics, spoke English, I believe German, French, and of course later on Italian, though Italian was the language that she knew the least of, and that's where she wanted to go. That was a little weird.
Hey,
But
there's no better way to learn a language.
I suppose, I mean, look
As
at the
a language person myself.
right, right. I can, distill the fact of me crossing the border into and trying to live a few months in Mexico and having to learn the language as opposed to just wanting to learn the language.
Right.
So anyway, she actually worked 3 jobs on top of a full load, saved the money to pay for her own year abroad. So she wasn't a mommy and daddy's girl, and at least, they're going to give me everything that I want. I need to work for it. And
No trust fund baby here.
exactly. So she ended up enrolling in a year abroad and she ended up relocating to do a year at the university in Perugia, Italy, where she was roommates with Meredith Kercher, a young exchange student from United Kingdom, and 2 doctors in training or lawyers in training, Italian girls that were also in that program, which I understand that program there at the university is pretty popular with people from all over the world, not just the United States, but there was a lot of people there from Africa, from other parts of Europe, from Australia, from New Zealand, so pretty popular multinational destination there in Perugia. So
That's interesting. I'd never heard of it before this.
me either before this case. I mean, but if you look at the players in this case, a lot of them were from all over the world. And you had a huge mix of people.
Yes.
In this one little Italian town. So that's where we are. She had a pretty uneventful first few weeks there. One night.
That really struck me was that this happened very, very shortly after.
Yeah. I don't even think she finished the semester. I mean, it was.
No. It was like she moved in like August or something, and then it was the 1st of November.
That this happened. She was working at a local bar, because the owner of the bar actually said that he thought it would be beneficial to his business to have the pretty young American there that spoke several languages. So she was kind of hired for being an American, and
he's not wrong.
No, he's not. I mean, it's like it's just like we talked about with our last case, with our little cannibal friend from Japan. He, it's often what you're not associated with that becomes exotic. And so that's what people tend to be fascinated with. And I can see having that working in your.
Right. Also, though, if it's such a multicultural area, if she can speak multiple languages, then that's gonna make her better able to do her job.
Definitely.
And the guy who owned the bar, I forget his name.
But Patrick Lumumba. That was his name. And had moved there and opened up the bar. Had a good relationship with all of his employees, text them frequently, pretty personable. But then there was the fateful night about a week before this happened that Meredith, Amanda, and their other 2 roommates actually went to an opera performance and an art gallery, and that's where she met her soon-to-be boyfriend,
Raffaele.
I'm afraid I'm going to butcher it. Sollecito, Raffaele Sollecito.
Sollecito or something.
Yeah. She was actually attracted to him because he looked like Harry Potter, she said.
I did hear that, an Italian Harry Potter, which is like a nerd alert.
Yeah. Well, she said I've actually heard some interviews with her where she said she had already read the first Harry Potter book in German, and she was going to get the second book in Italian to help with her Italian. And it was during this that she met him. So I can understand what her attraction was. So
sure. I didn't realize that was only a week before.
Yeah. They'd only been hanging out like a week, and they went from friends to more than friends in just a few days. I mean,
which is, I've been 20 before.
Yeah, I've been 20. But yeah, they were hanging out, they were having sex, they were smoking weed, they were
reading Harry Potter, everything that you would do.
Everything totally normal college shit. That was one thing that people seemed real judgy about that shit, and like they thought people were very, very quick to say like, well, I bet she did it because
she's loose sexually.
Right, because she likes to fuck.
Yep, pretty much. She in fact, the prosecutor, and I thought this was weird. You have the same person prosecuting it as you do that was the lead investigator. Giuliano Magini was the lead investigator on the case and the prosecutor.
He sounded like a real piece of work.
Oh, he was, and he was a Sherlock Holmes fan. He was like, had read everything
like,
that Arthur Conan Doyle ever wrote.
Apparently not real good at Sherlock Holmesing.
No, because that was a key part of his investigation into the case, because he said because of the proximity of the body, and the fact that the body was covered with a blanket, showed that the killer had to be female, because a male killer
would never thought to do that.
Well, that's where he's wrong, because if you've read anything about criminal pathology and criminal psychology, which I have, and I know you have too, because we are obsessed with serial killers.
Because we're weirdos, yeah.
Yeah, we know that anybody that feels remorse for what they just did, like crimes of passion, will usually cover the body because they don't want to look at it.
Or if it's someone that they like know or have some sort of warm feelings toward.
Yeah, they'll cover it because
they don't want to do that because like a dog that won't look you in the eye after doing something bad.
Exactly. Exactly.
This stuff with the like Italian Harry Potter stuff and the like investigator who is obsessed with Sherlock Holmes, if that was in like an HBO limited series or something, would be like, this is heavy-handed.
Yeah. It sounds like the movie Clue.
Right, yes, exactly.
That kind of campy.
It'd be like, I really am having a hard time getting into this because of these random character traits that feel really made up.
Yeah.
And yet here we are.
Yeah, this could easily be made into a Monty Python gag.
Right, like absolutely.
And I would almost like to see that.
Actually, as soon as you said that, I was like, oh.
That would be fun. John Cleese?
I was going to say, what's John Cleese up to these days?
But so yeah, I believe it was November 20th.
It was November 1st.
November 1st, 2007. 2007? Yes, 2007.
I do know that much.
Yeah.
I did come armed with at least that information.
November 1st, 2007.
Mm-hmm.
Amanda was spending the night at Raffaele's. And evidently his apartment, his father, he was studying computer science. His father was a very rich urologist, MD, type, and had actually purchased. Yep. Had purchased him his own flat so he didn't have to have roommates. But the problem was that it flooded a lot.
Yeah.
And that's a problem. And evidently Amanda was going to take a shower there that night, but because she had to go to work, but then Patrick had texted her and said, hey, it's not a lot of reservations, not going to be busy, don't bother coming into work.
Mm-hmm.
And then she sent him a text, which was picked up by the prosecutor and the investigators and kind of taken way out of context, where she simply said, I will see you later, which is just a common European colloquialism for see you later.
Right.
Not I'm actually going to see you later tonight is the way that they were.
Right, exactly. Yeah, it's just sure. And if there it would be one thing if there was any other like corroborating stuff. I don't know. So yeah, see you later is fully innocuous. Or like is reasonably, I guess it's not always, but is like could I think reasonably be assumed to be, oh, okay, great, I'll See you later then.
Yep, exactly. So he was at, so she was going to shower there, but the plumbing went awry. And so
Mm-hmm.
she said she was just going to go back to her own apartment, shower, and come back because she couldn't take a shower there because of his plumbing. And he said, I'm going to call my father and I'm going to ask him to please send plumbers to fix this plumbing once and for all. So
Yes.
that happened. It's near midnight or near the next morning. So she goes back to her apartment. She noticed that the door is open, which is weird. And then
Yeah, I mean,
yeah, but she said
that's weird.
she said normally Meredith and their other two roommates were pretty responsible. So
Right.
she thought it was a little weird, but still went on in.
This
Didn't
is
notice,
where I get very confused about this kind of timeline of door was open, because I had heard kind of two separate things. One, that she went ahead and went in and was like, oh well, and then another one that was like, it looked like one of the rooms had been ransacked.
What I have ascertained is that the front door was not standing open, it was just unlocked. So when I say open, I mean unlocked.
Oh.
And then she went into the bathroom to take her shower, and she noticed blood in the sink, blood on the floor, and that's when she started to get worried.
Mm-hmm.
So she saw Meredith's door closed, but it was locked. And she knocked on it, said Meredith would never lock her door. That's just unusual. Now, they've only been living together a few weeks, so...
And there had apparently been some tension.
Yeah, Meredith and her had a few words because Meredith was more of a... She's a kind of a bookworm, stayed at home, studied, whereas Amanda went out and partied.
Which feels like, again, just sort of innocuous roommate disagreements.
Yeah.
And if I was gonna be like roommate, to imagine like what kind of disagreements would be like murderous disagreements, it would not be that.
Right. No. I'm not
even for 20-year-olds.
No. I'm not gonna kill somebody over, them coming home late at night or stealing my soy milk from the fridge or something.
I'm gonna call my mom and be real mad about it.
I'm gonna have some strong language for my mom about that.
Yes.
But I'm probably not even gonna confront them because I don't like confrontation. I'm weird like that.
Well, that's not weird. And also 20, being 20. Let's just remember that everyone involved in this is like 20 or 21, or at least the two women involved.
Which is unusual because we talk about her, take back to even the European educational system, how much different it is. They're like, her other two roommates were in law school. Here in the United States, you wouldn't even be able to apply for law school until you finished a bachelor's degree, which would make you 22, 23. And there they were like in their third year of law school or something, which was like, which shows, you go straight from high school in Europe to a school that teaches whatever you're going to be.
Like a vocation, yeah.
Yeah, you go from high school to medical school in Europe. You skip the whole pre-med thing. And
how would you feel if you were like the hospital and the doctor comes in
and he's like 22? Well, it would be weird. It'd be weird.
Excuse me, little boy. Are you lost?
It would be weird. I'll admit it would be weird. And I think that's why that would never happen here unless they were some kind of prodigy. Because if you're a foreign doctor and you come here, I know because I have friends that have had to do this. One was actually a vascular surgeon from Uzbekistan and had been through 8 years of training there, but it was, starts right after high school. So it was like 4 years of medical school, 4 years of a surgery residency there. But he comes over here and wants to practice. He has to start all over. He has to pretty much go back through the last 2 years of medical school.
Which is it's so stupid.
Yeah, and then redo a residency and then a fellowship. So he lost about 12 years from coming over here to practice.
So dumb. Having said that, I just think about myself at 22.
Yeah.
And no business making any sort of serious life or death choices for anyone, including myself.
Exactly. But they were lawyers.
But
we
they were
see
lawyers.
but we see how well the Italian criminal justice system worked in this case.
Well, yeah.
But I think it was a one-off.
I
I would
would
so.
hope that that's the case, and probably we would have heard a lot more about it in general.
Yeah.
If this was like par for the course.
Yeah. Well, I have some more. I have some like interesting things to say once we get to that part, but
Okay.
anyway, so the door to Meredith's room was locked, and she saw the blood, and then she said a chill kind of ran up her spine, and she's like, something's wrong. So she steps outside. She calls Raffaele and asks him to please come over. He comes over. He sees what's going on, and they decide we need to call the police. So he calls the police, and they say now there's different types of police in Italy.
Yes.
There's regular police, and then there's postal inspector police, and then there's military police.
Yes.
Because Perugia was evidently a big military stronghold for the Italian army. So he calls the police, but lo and behold, they send postal inspectors.
Listen, you know what? Serious postal crime.
Yeah. Locked door, blood.
Locked door, blood.
Call the post office.
Sounds like a job for the Postmaster General.
Yep. So that's who they send. And they decide, oh, we're not qualified to handle this. So they call the military police.
Having said that, I'm pretty sure that they still like
touch stuff.
Touched things. And instead of just being like, let's wait, they like crowbarred open the door and stuff.
That's what they didn't open the door, but what they did do was allow Amanda, Raffaele, and their other two roomers by this time to just meander around the house and touch whatever instead of let's go outside and we need to police tape this off and not let anybody touch anything till the investigators get here. And then they just allowed these people to mill about the house, disturbing evidence.
2007, not 1957, before we knew better.
Exactly. I mean, we had DNA technology at this time. So finally, the military police get there, and they actually crowbar down the door to Meredith's room, and they find Amanda said she was outside. She overheard some very Italian she didn't quite understand because she was still learning, but she said it sounded very distressed.
Yeah.
And a lot of voices coming from the bedroom. So she goes back inside, and lo and behold, there is Meredith's body with a slit throat on the bed with a blanket headband over the body.
Hey, question. How can you tell if it's distressed Italian?
She just said it was
versus
by their tones.
I'm just saying, have you ever heard someone speak Italian?
I have. I mean,
they always sound upset.
Yeah. It's the same with German. Germans, to me, the German language, though beautiful, and I have a lot of wonderful friends that are German and speak German, they always sound angry.
Yeah.
So. But probably because she was studying the language and linguistics was her thing, she could tell it's a little distressed.
Distressed, as opposed to just the normal distressed sound of Italian speakers.
Right. So, of course, there, and he starts taking fingerprints, and from what we understand, because of all the people that didn't need to be there milling about, a lot of the evidence was disturbed. The most telling piece of evidence was a thumbprint in Meredith's blood that was found underneath the pillow that her head was on.
Yeah. And
they did take a fingerprint from that.
Yeah.
And so basically, both Raffaele and Amanda were let go at that time, the same as her roommates. They did their investigation. They stayed other places that night. And the next day, they were invited to the police station to be interrogated or to be questioned.
Yeah.
And this is where we get into some of the drama around it. A lot of video of them being very playful and romantic in the waiting room of the police station. Was evidently doing cartwheels and stretching.
I mean, it bothers me. It really bothers me when people sort of assume what like grief is supposed to look like and then make judgments about someone's guilt or innocence based on how they're responding to this horrible traumatic event. The thing is, like, someone was just murdered in your apartment. I mean, it's very likely that she's dissociating a little bit. I mean, how do you even...
She's 20.
Right, she's 20. How do you even process this?
She's in a foreign country.
She's in a foreign country. She's got this boyfriend that she's overwhelmed. Like, of course they're, like,
Comforting
hugging
each other,
and being lovey-dovey. And also, cartwheel... If I have learned anything about anxiety over these past few weeks, it's that doing some exercise is a great way to, like, use that energy. And if your roommate has just been murdered in your home, you are 20, you are in a foreign country, and you're about to be interrogated about this, you've got some pent up, maybe anxious energy that needs to get out. So maybe you're going to do a few cartwheels, and you're allowed to still laugh sometimes just because someone died.
And the thing of it is, her roommates had already been questioned, and they said that they thought it was shocking that when they talked about Meredith must have suffered, they said that Amanda actually blurted out, of course she suffered, her effing throat was cut. And they said they thought that was a little strange, but to me, that's just being a sarcastic 20-year-old. Of course she suffered.
Who's an overwhelmed one at that. Anyway.
And of course she suffered. She had her throat slit. Of course she suffered.
Like, of course she did. And, like, that seems like more...
Yeah. And let's remember...
more trauma brain than...
She didn't know any of these girls that well. They had only been together since September. So you're talking 6 to 8 weeks of knowing somebody, maybe not even that. You're not going to be as traumatized as if it had been your roommate for the entire 4 years of college.
Right. But also, I don't know. All of it tracks with trauma brain for me. I'm no professional, but
I think
but I do get very anxious sometimes.
And I've been known to get up and pace.
Yes, exactly.
I may go to the restroom, ladies' room, 100 times when I'm stressed because it has that kind of reaction to me.
I have a like a stationary spinning bike in my living room that I've just been going to fucking town on when I feel like I don't know what to do with myself.
Exactly.
It's just like that,
yeah.
Anyway.
So her and Raffaele are brought in, separated. And over the next 2 to 3 days, they're interrogated a total of like 56 hours.
Which should be criminal.
Yeah.
Honestly.
Yeah. And
nothing that comes out of that should be admissible.
No.
At that point, people will say anything.
Yeah. That's the case of the West Memphis 3 that I could have been 3 different parts. The guy that they interrogated for a long period of time at the Memphis Police Department had an IQ of 70, so he was already slow.
Yeah.
And they literally led him into his confession.
Well, right. And then you're like, lack of sleep, oftentimes lack of food and water.
Because she said they would not give her water. They would not give
them food. Again.
No breaks.
No breaks. At some point,
you're going to have to pee. Maybe you just have to pee really bad and you're willing to say whatever you can, so they might let you go to a bathroom. And both her and Raffaele ended up implicating them. Like, Raffaele implicated her, she implicated herself. Because they continued to hammer in on him about, didn't she had, he said she spent the night, she was with me the whole night, there's no way she had time to do, because the body, you could tell by the status of the body, it had been a few hours, it didn't just happen. So they kept leading him, he said, into,
and then he's like, well, yeah, she left to go take
a shower, and then they made that seem like it was hours before. So he implicated her, and he said it was later he felt he was in a trance and they were leading him into saying it, so he just said
it. Sounds like Sherlock Holmes bro had already made up his mind about what had happened.
Yeah, I don't know. This would later come out. Even one of the judges on the appeals court would comment on it, that he felt that the investigator was rushing to get somebody arrested because it could be very damaging to the economy there because of
I
all
mean,
the foreign students that come in.
yes, it's
Yeah.
really. I understand why the pressure that would be on for that. It always. I shouldn't be surprised. It happens all the time in these stories.
Yeah.
But because that's all well and good that you got a conviction, but if you get a conviction of someone who didn't do it, then like there's a murderer still out.
Yep. Yep. And
You
then
still have a murderer on your hands.
Yeah. And so Amanda said the same thing, that at one point she was struck on the back of the head by one of the officers. She didn't understand everything they were saying because they were speaking to her in Italian. They would not provide somebody that knew English to talk with her. She said she was struck. She was yelled at, screamed at. It's like they were trying to break her down so she would confess. And finally, she confessed that maybe Patrick did it, her boss, because Patrick had kind of a thing for Meredith, and that maybe it was, sexual exploit that went too far. So they arrested her boss, Patrick, as a result of what Amanda said. And he was later exonerated because they found no DNA evidence of his anywhere. So he was later exonerated. But she actually implicated her boss. And because they had that text message, and what does this mean? I'll see you later. I'll see you later. It just means I'll see you later.
It means I'll see you the next time I'm at work.
So they eventually let them go, and then eventually arrested Amanda and Raffaele for the murder.
I feel like it was like the next day or something.
The next day.
Very quick.
The next day. Now, what Amanda did say is that her mom, from the first time she called her mother when it was happening, like the body was still in there, that her mother had told her to get her passport, go immediately to the airport, and just come back home. Because her mother did not trust a foreign court system. Which
ended up being
the absolute
a good call
truth.
In this case. Having said that, if she had fled the country, they were already every one of her actions was being
scrutinized if she had fled.
Scrutinized for guilt.
Right.
And had she fled the country.
Yeah.
Although, I mean,
she didn't want to leave Raffaele because he was Italian. He was nowhere he could go. He was just a different part of Italy. Yeah.
But also, he's your boyfriend of
a week.
A week. You'll find someone else.
Yeah. But so anyway, they arrested them. Patrick's exonerated because they found no DNA evidence, but that thumbprint implicated another person that lived in the building by the name of Rudy
Guede or something.
Yeah. Anyway,
Rudy. Also from Ivory Coast.
Ivory Coast. Yep. Who had actually fled Italy already and was in Germany. So that's not suspicious.
Well, this is exactly what I'm saying.
Yeah.
This is exactly what I'm saying, is he was already out of the country, and we have made a judgment based on also the fingerprint. I mean, the bloody fingerprint. So they didn't know Rudy, right?
No, they knew that he hung around the apartments. He lived in the apartments. He still kind of hung around, but he also had a criminal record from Africa for running drugs and that sort of thing. So he was an unscrupulous character at best. And so they arrest him, they interrogate him. They extradite him back to Italy. They interrogate him. And he said that, yes, he did have sex with Meredith that night, but he did not kill her. And the story he gave is laughable. I mean, really, I could have come up with a much better story, but that he had gotten up to go to the bathroom. He stayed in the bathroom longer than he intended. When he got back to Meredith's room, there was a tall guy standing over her. She was already dead, and the guy ran out. And he was too scared to call an ambulance or the police.
Why?
That was his actual story.
Okay, because people would have. But then, how did he say that his thumbprint got under the pillow?
That they never really. I couldn't find
Okay.
any information on that. I mean, it was just weird. So, yeah. So anyway, he's tried and actually found guilty and sentenced to 16 years for the murder of Meredith Kercher. And all this time, they're still over here trying. Amanda and Raffaele, the story that the prosecutor's putting out is one of a sexual tryst, a sexual orgy gone wrong. Again, going back to their looseness. You know, the American girl is loose, and she twisted the mind of this poor Italian boy. That's exactly how it was portrayed. And she spent 4 years in the Italian prison system waiting for the trial, everything, which she was found. They were found guilty,
and then she's convicted.
They're both convicted. They sentenced to 28 years for her, 25 years for him, and they are both sent back to the Italian prisons. Now, while in prison, this came out in her book, but while in prison, she was actually sexually assaulted and sexually abused by one of the guards, by some of the females in the prison. So her whole persona, the Foxy Noxy thing, which was a nickname she had from high school because of her
soccer,
her aggressiveness in soccer. So they twisted that into some perverted, sexualized nickname, and so that's the reputation she had, even though it wasn't true. And who cares how many people she slept with? That doesn't make her a murderer.
No, that would.
So, first appeal, and the conviction is overturned because of the lack of DNA evidence. The evidence that they found on the knife that was hers should have been there because she lived
in the fucking house.
And she cooked in the fucking house. So her DNA was supposed to be there. And so it was overturned. They were freed. And actually, her parents got her out of Italy as quickly as they could, as they should.
Yeah.
And a few years later, 2013, they appealed. The prosecution appealed the overturned thing, got a new trial.
Yes. Convicted again.
Yes. And she refused to return to Italy.
Of course she did.
I'm not going back there. And it would have been up to the Obama administration at the time to extradite her if they had wanted to. And our current president, Donald Trump, even weighed in on this and said, she's innocent. This is bullshit. Even if they do convict her again, we shouldn't extradite her. I mean, he actually said that. And, you know, of course, his whole thing, we don't want an American citizen. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But so the Italian public was definitely calling for her blood by this point. And then she's convicted again.
What about Raffaele?
He was still, I mean, he had to go back to, he was taken back into custody. He got the worst of it.
Was he convicted again as well?
They were both convicted again, and it was the same sentences, you know, 28 and 26 years. And so they were, she hired another defense team to kind of plead her case up to the Italian Supreme Court. And in 2015, the conviction was overturned. And the judge actually put it into it, saying that not only am I overturning this judgment, I am exonerating both Amanda Knox and Raffaele from anything to do with this crime. And he is the one that said that he felt the investigation was handled poorly, the prosecution was handled poorly. It ignored the fact there was already somebody that had been found guilty of this crime because of blood and fingerprint evidence at the scene. It was already serving time. There was no viable DNA evidence connecting either of them, and what DNA there was mishandled by the investigators. So she can't ever be prosecuted again, thank goodness.
Well, that's good. Now, recently, Amanda Knox has gotten married.
Mhm.
Recently, not to Raffaele.
No.
But there was some controversy surrounding that because she and her husband tried to crowdfund their wedding, their space-themed wedding.
Yep.
Where they were going to have space puzzles and crazy alien food or something, and people were like,
Yep.
really? You're crowdfunding your...
Well, I mean, it makes sense because from what I understand, her family was bankrupted because of her defense.
Well, sure.
And I understand why that might be, but
it still feels weird to me.
It was weird. I'll admit it was weird. I mean, and she does have quite a career now as a advocate for American citizens prosecuted in other countries, and she also is an advocate for preventing things like sex shaming, which happened to her. And she's become a true crime commentator for a lot of major networks. So there should have been enough money to fund that wedding. So I see what you're saying.
I mean, I'm not saying that it's weird enough that it's like
alien.
That means that she was guilty, but like, just it's like read the room. I don't know.
And she's also produced the documentary that appeared on Netflix recently
about her.
About her case, not necessarily about her, but about the case. And Raffaele himself, completed his degree, had a career in IT, but is now a true crime host for an Italian television network. So
at least there's that, I guess.
Yeah.
And then all right. So where do we fall on
I think
this case?
I think they got the right person. I think Rudy. I think he did it. I think he's serving. I don't think he's serving enough time. But who I feel for in this case, though, is Meredith's family. They never really got any closure. I think they feel that the two people involved got away with it somehow. And I understand because that's coming from an emotional place. But not being connected to the case, you and I can look at it more rationally and say there wasn't any evidence that connected Raffaele or Amanda to this crime. But yet there was plenty that connected Rudy, and Rudy was found guilty.
Do we think that he worked alone or had an accomplice?
I believe it was a one, because there was no other DNA. From what I've read, there was no other DNA found in the house other than his that the other should have been there. It was the people that lived there. Some of Raffaele's was there, but he came over to visit Amanda, so it should have been there. And the evidence that they were talking about was found in common areas, like the kitchen, on the kitchen knife. The only way it got into Meredith's bedroom was from transfer from the object from a common area into her room. The only evidence actually found in the room, like on the bed clothes, her clothes, was Rudy's. They did say they found a small amount of DNA on her bra clasp.
Oh yeah, the missing bra clasp.
Yeah. I don't know how to explain that. I know she hung out with Amanda at the bar when she worked. Having worked in the hospitality industry, I know that my bra strap was popped many, many times by men at the restaurant. It is. So I'm saying that's probably what happened, And maybe she did have sex with Patrick, and that's how it happened. But I don't think that one little piece of DNA on a bra clasp convicts somebody of murder, though.
Right.
Especially when they all hung around together. So that's my opinion. I could be dead wrong, but that's just my opinion.
Yeah, I do feel bad for poor Meredith and her family.
Yeah. But I think that the person that did it's in jail.
I think you're probably right.
And I guess they have to understand that that's their closure. That Amanda and Raffaele didn't do it. And they shouldn't be held accountable for it. And as to them making a career off this case, what the hell else are they going to do with their lives? They're always going to be known as Amanda and Raffaele from this case.
Well, right. And I mean, the thing is, she's doing like advocacy work.
Yeah, she's trying to help other Americans that are
and, like,
abused in other countries. You know, Raffaele did open his own IT consulting firm and ran that, and then got the gig as the true crime commentator. I mean, even if my business was successful and I got tapped to host a crime show, I'm probably going to close my business and go do that because that's fun and that's interesting.
Because that's fun and interesting.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Also, someone who has spent time in prison, having been convicted of something that they probably didn't do, probably makes for an excellent true crime commentator.
Yeah.
And probably has a lot more empathy for people and more of a willingness, yes, and more of a willingness to take into account all the evidence as opposed to having knee-jerk reactions about definitely that person did it.
Because you and we're a perfect example. We do true crime stuff, but we always seem to align ourselves with the victim, as you should. And when the evidence starts to point that way, oh, they did it. They did it.
Oh, yeah.
That's my opinion. But, you know, he might be able to look at, I mean, we know they didn't do it because this case has gone on for so long. But if this was a fresh case that we were reporting on, would we have the same opinion? And I think with someone like that, you have the ability to say, well, you have to look at this in two different ways. You know, they have that rationality.
Yeah. Weirdly, this wasn't really on my radar when it was happening, probably because I'm about the same age as her, and so I was 19, and therefore couldn't see anything outside of 6 inches in front of my face.
Right.
On account of being 19.
Yep.
I mean, like, I'm sure that I knew a little bit about it, but I don't feel like I had an opinion one way or another.
I just honestly, I heard that there was an American that was arrested for the murder of a British woman in Italy. I said, oh, well, we'll see how that turns out. But then I didn't really catch on to it till she was convicted and then set free and then convicted again.
And years later.
And that's when it kind of blew up.
Yeah.
As far as being over here. So we have to look at it. For all the I mean, she's hated in Europe. She said that she would never go back to Italy. Can't say I blame her, but in 2018 she actually did. She went over to help another American accused in Italy. And so she put herself in harm's way because there's probably still some angry people over there.
I'm sure.
And you know, so she went back over there to do some advocacy work. But any career she has is going to be as a result of this case. It has to be, because even though they were found not guilty, that's still, if you Google her, that's all you're going to see.
Well, right. Yeah. I mean, I can't imagine like Amanda Knox going into like HR.
Yeah, and trying to applying for a job as an interpreter because she has the linguistics degree, and then them Googling her, that's all they're going to see, and they're probably not going to hire her.
Yes, being too famous doesn't make you a great interpreter.
No.
I mean, like, even if you're interpreting is great, you're supposed to, as an interpreter, it's like you're not even there.
Yep.
And if you're infamous or famous, no one can forget that you're there.
I hear a lot of true crime people say, well, I think she's a narcissist. Yeah, she may be.
Maybe. Doesn't make her a murderer.
No, but I say to those people, you're a narcissist because you're on YouTube trying to make a career of it. I'm a narcissist because I'm on YouTube and on stage trying to make a career of it. Same could be said for you. You know, we're on YouTube and you do comedy on stage too. So everybody's narcissist to a certain point. And she has to be, because she has to make herself relevant, because she has to make a living.
Yeah. Oh, I did also see that she posted an Instagram recently in her Italian prison clothes, which actually look really comfortable.
Yeah. I think it's on like one of the anniversary maybe of her release or her.
I don't know, but it was like dark gray sweatpants and like a nice light gray sweater.
Yeah. Well, her book,
real cute.
The book that she wrote actually went into a lot of detail about her prison life, and that's where we found out that she had been sexually abused. in
which
prison.
is horrible, and I am a firm believer that even criminals in prison do not deserve that.
No.
Um,
And her
and
law,
I
once
think-
she was scared to tell her lawyer. When she finally told her Italian lawyers, they reported it to the Ministry of Prisons, and that guard was removed from duty. Thank goodness they did handle it.
That's really excellent, and that actually gives me a lot of hope that this was kind of a one-off situation where
Yeah,
some small town cops kind of didn't.
Yeah.
I wonder how many like other murder cases there had been in this area, because that's a common thing in the United States as well, where when a murder happens in a small town where nothing has ever happened, the police force is like out of their depth. Like they just don't have the training or experience to know how to like work a scene appropriately and like preserve evidence, whatever. Not through any fault of their own. I mean, they just it's just a new experience.
Same thing happened with the West Memphis 3. I go back to that case because I did so much research on it. They invested the West Memphis, Arkansas police force and the Memphis, Tennessee police messed that up royally. And they were offered help from the FBI, and they should have turned it over to the FBI.
Yes.
But they didn't.
Because it's baffling to me the way that I feel like it's gotten better over time, where police forces are more willing to like work together and share information and stuff, but so many like prolific killers have been able to continue killing for longer than they should have been able to, simply because police forces would not share information. And so they're, every place every small town in the state thinks they had 2 murders when really it was the same person. And if everybody had just like, I don't know, picked up the phone and been like, hey, this weird thing happened.
Yeah. Golden State Killer.
Golden State Killer is my go-to for that.
He was a cat burglar in Northern California. No one ever in 2 or 3 little cities around there. No one compared notes, and he was a cop in one of them. And then he moved down to Southern California, started breaking in houses and then raping people. No one bothered to compare notes.
I know, no one bothered to compare notes.
And then years later, we have a true crime podcaster married to Patton Oswalt, Michelle McNamara, who actually
God rest her.
Yes,
God rest her.
Who actually cracked the case and put 2 and 2 together with a retired Los Angeles County Sheriff's deputy. They put 2 and 2 together and actually connected the whole string of crimes.
Which is yes, that is the case that I had in mind when I was saying that. It's so and
Zodiac. They never caught Zodiac, never will catch Zodiac because no one would compare notes.
That's a great movie, though. Have you ever seen the movie?
Yeah, with Al Pacino. Yeah, that's good.
It's excellent. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like I had a point, but it's gone.
Sorry.
No, not your fault.
But I agree. I think the same small town politics that
yes, that's what it was.
is in play there as in the United States. May not have been any different if it was the British citizen killing the American citizen in the United States in a small town. The outcome may not have been any different.
Right. And it's so much easier to point the finger at someone that is not a citizen of your country. It's very easy to want to like other a person who committed a violent crime and say like, oh well, someone who's been around here for a long time would never have done that. It must be the interloper that came in recently that did it.
A lot of that small town prejudice. I mean, that's
I
how.
don't even, and sometimes it's prejudice.
It's not prejudice. It's not prejudice like black versus white or
Latino
versus white. It's prejudice.
more
I know them. He's a good old boy. He's a good old girl.
I think it's just easier.
Yeah.
It's just really, really hard to take in the fact that I don't know, that someone close to you or close to your culture or whatever did it. Although
Right.
I guess it turns out that the guy who did it was also not Italian.
No. But in a town that's mostly immigrants or exchange
Mhm.
students or whatnot, that's to be expected. There
Mhm.
wasn't a whole lot of native citizens of Italy and that particular town there, from what I could understand. It's
That's
mostly
interesting.
kind of like Nashville. There's very
I
few
was
native
gonna say
Nashvillians. You know, you're one.
I'm one.
Yeah, but I'm not. I mean, I went to Alabama to California, then California to Nashville. So, you know, it'd be like that, you know, sort
Right.
of.
But also, yeah, an established person even from
Mhm.
another place versus a you know, a
Exactly.
brand new person. And also it's like a young pretty girl, it makes for a very sexy murder suspect.
It does.
You
And the
know,
fact that she
that's
was,
so much more salacious that like
and by the Italian I'm not gonna say it's Italian. I think it's by that prosecutor and investigators. And I still think it's weird he was both.
it is weird, but
Yeah. By
that's
his
maybe how
standards,
things happen.
his standards, she was a dirty slut murderer.
Dirty
And
slut murder, but and that a dirty slut murderer makes for such a better story
then
than
African immigrant gets mad and kills
right.
her during sex gone bad or whatever it was.
Right. Well, and I just we expect most of the time men are the murderers.
Right.
A pretty young white American is the murderer is just a much more
Sexy.
salacious, interesting story.
Yeah.
And I heard just today, actually, I was listening to a different podcast, that apparently the love of true crime in Italy is huge and like more so than even here.
Yeah. I can imagine.
And then a big story like that just gets a lot of
Mhm.
good ratings and a lot of good money.
Maybe he was trying to further his own career by letting
Maybe.
Buster, you know.
Or
I'm going to
maybe
paint this as an orgy
yeah.
gone wrong.
Or I think probably also he probably thought of himself as like the Sherlock Holmes of the situation with really good instincts. And he's just got a hunch, Tracy.
Yep.
And that hunch is absolute bullshit.
I honestly,
we feel terrible for Meredith and her family. We feel
concerned. Because they're always left out. They're always left out of any story. We didn't even mention them that much. I mean,
right.
They're really left out of anything covering the story. It's all about Amanda Raffaele, then Rudy.
Right. Although at the end of the day, like they weren't in the country.
No, they weren't.
You know.
You know, they were. The British government couldn't even do anything to help them because even though she was a citizen, it happened in another country.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, and then the defendant was yet from another country. Both two of the three defendants. So
it's like the UN of murder.
It is. It is. Really sad.
Awful.
But that's where we stand. She can't ever be prosecuted, at least in Italy, for it. And she's innocent, as far as we know.
As far as we know. Although apparently, according to some message boards on the internet, there are Amanda Knox truthers. There are truthers for everything, I guess.
Yeah. You should see the comments on my video when I did West Memphis 3. There were people because I literally came out saying, I don't know. I don't know if they got away with it. I don't know if they did it. Because it could have been either way, but I had so many people preaching to me saying they're definitely guilty and got away with it. Or, no, they were innocent, you know. But then the whole time I'm saying, somebody killed those 3 innocent little boys.
Right.
Where are they and where are they? You know.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Well, that ended on a down note.
It did. It did. Anyway, thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. We'll be back soon with another true crime case. If you want to support podcast or our channel, links are down below. Until next time.
Bye.
Oops. Shut off the recording here.